Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. I figured I'd get a video put together before the last Wednesday nighter of the year. I'm going to be heading out to pick Hank and Duke up at school here in a few minutes. Come home, pick up some snacks, get back over to the lake for the last tournament of the year. And it is a very, very cool day out. I think our high today did not even hit 60 degrees. Temperatures are falling. That means water temperatures are falling. So I figured I would do a video today regarding my favorite baits for falling water temperatures. So these baits are generally good anytime you're talking about moving from the high period of summer water temps down into what I would consider true fall temperatures, which is down around that 60-degree or lower mark. So as water temperatures are falling, the fish are moving, and these baits will help you catch more fish during this transitional period, which can be one of the more difficult times to fish. Now, having said that, there are some things that you can keep in mind that will help you during this time as well. The first, and potentially the most important, is generally speaking, around this time period, you've got a pretty well-defined thermocline, and it's probably going to be at the highest level throughout the highest level period that it's been throughout the year. So what that means is it condenses the fish in a much smaller period. So if you're talking about the thermocline being in 18 feet of water, you should only be looking in 18 feet of water or less. So the fish are going to be above that thermocline. They're going to be much more accessible to the anglers. And a lot of these baits have to go along with that. The other thing to keep in mind is that you have a lot of bait fish that are starting to move higher up in the water column because the thermocline is rising, but also because those falling water temperatures are bringing them up, and they're starting to make their transitions into the backs of creek channels. Now, regardless of whether you have shad or not, this happens even in the North Country where you have no shad, but you have a lot of other types of lake minnows or panfish. They as well come up out of deeper water and will start moving into a lot of shallower areas as well. So a lot of these baits that I have are either going to mimic shad or they're going to mimic bluegill. Now, before I get into these baits, I want to remind you guys that I do a bunch of lake breakdowns through fishthemoment.com. So if you're looking for a little bit of help on your lakes, we provide 40 waypoints as well as a detailed breakdown as to where and why these fish are going to be in certain areas based on that specific season. So if you need a little bit of fall help, check out the lake breakdowns that I do at fishthemoment.com. I'll put the link in the video description for you so you can check those out if you want. Also, if you're looking to support the channel in another manner, and you need to purchase some tackle, right now is a really good time to do that using my Tackle Warehouse affiliate link. Tackle Warehouse has a 15% off sale going on, I believe, until the end of the month. So check that out as well. I believe all these baits are carried there. I guess I can't necessarily guarantee that because I haven't looked. But if they are there, I'll put a link in the video description for you to check them out. So first and foremost, one of my absolute favorite baits to fish during cool periods is a nice good jig. This is a Picasso hog snatcher. I've got a meaty chunk, a max scent power bait, max scent meaty chunk by Berkeley on the back. The key here is this is really one of the times where a jig starts to shine. It's a bigger profile bait. It mimics a lot of that young of the year forage that's grown up and gotten into a bigger size. And honestly, a lot of the bass are just out there feeding on bluegill and crayfish, and this is one of the best baits to mimic it. Not to mention the fact that the majority of your fishing with a jig is going to take place around structure, whether it's a laydown tree, a dock, some sort of hard object, maybe it's a boulder. And the reality is, anytime you have falling water temperatures, those objects will collect sunlight, produce heat, draw the bass into them, and when the bass are tight to cover, a jig is one of the best baits to go in after them. Now, another bait that I really like to fish during this time period is a Swimbait. So in this case, this is a 4/0 3/8 ounce core tackle tush, and then I've got here a Raid, it's a Raid 4-inch full swing swim bait. It's a mouthful. Basically, what I'm looking to do is mimic any sort of shad species. Your swim baits are going to be absolutely dynamite all the way up until ice up if you have that, or the coldest period of coldest water temperatures of the year in the winter months. The forage of your shad or your perch or your bait fish, whatever it is, become a primary forage, because a lot of your crayfish start going dormant and the fish really start to key in on anything that resembles a shad or some sort of forage species for the bass, similar to a shad or panfish. Swimbait, one of the best ways to go about and mimic that. Along those same lines, I really like to fish crankbaits. Now, not necessarily super deep diving crankbaits. This is a Duo Realis 8A. This is the M65 8A, so it dives, roughly down to that 8-foot mark, but it is a good wide wobbling bait that has a very good deflection rate, and that's really the key here, because again, I'm going to be fishing this around targets. A lot of stumps, a lot of isolated big rocks, maybe even in and around some laydowns. The point here is those fish are going to be tight to objects that are absorbing sunlight to produce that heat. And I want a bait that's going to get down to them and deflect hard off those objects without getting snagged to create reaction strikes. And a crankbait is an excellent way to do that. Not only is it really good though for fishing around these, really specific objects, it's also a good bait just to cover water. And a lot of times you have a lot of bait that's starting to move into the backs of pockets, and when that happens, you get a lot of bass that are suspending in and around them. And a shallower diving crankbait is a really good way to fish in and around those areas that are starting to see a lot of bait fish pull into them. For me, a crankbait, absolute must until you start hitting water temperatures that are getting down to around 50 degrees. Next up, a lot of people don't feel this way. They would say that a topwater bait, like a buzzbait with a toad, in this case, this is the Toad Slayer by Picasso. It's made to squeak. It's got the rusted rivet on there, which to me is a super key aspect. If you listen closely, you can hear that real good squeaking sound matched up with a good toad bait. In this case, this is a Zoom horny toad. To me, a buzzbait shines during this period. When you start getting falling water temperatures, you're talking about having a lot of fish that start moving closer to the bank, a lot of fish that are keying in on bait fish, and you can fish this almost anywhere. You can fish it around still some remaining bank grass, skip it under docks, bring it over laydowns. Really good way at generating strikes when other topwater baits just don't seem to be as good. If you don't want to throw a buzzbait, you could pick up a chopo or a plopper and cover water in a similar fashion, but there is something about the fall period, falling water temperatures, when your favorite buzzbait really starts to shine. And I gotta say, this is one of my favorite colors. This is Gray Ghost. It can be difficult to find, but it's a very, very good color for that horny toad. Last but not least, I'm probably not going to surprise anybody with this, but at jerkbait, this is the Berkley Stunna 112, one of my absolute favorite jerkbaits. Lots of different colors will work. I like to pick the color based on water clarity, but a jerkbait is one of the absolute best baits for this period. A lot of people think it really starts to pick up action once the water temp gets below 60, but in reality, I like to throw it anytime you get falling water temperatures, because of a couple of things that are going on. One, a lot of times with your falling water temperatures, that puts stress on bait fish. Doesn't matter the time of year, and that leads to a high mortality rate, which means those dying shad make an easy meal for bass, which means your jerkbait makes an easy meal for bass because they think it's that dying shad. But more importantly, again, it goes back to what I was saying before. You have a lot of bait fish that are starting to move up within the top 15 feet of the water column, and a jerkbait fishes perfectly in that range. Most of these baits will get down 6 to 8 foot range, so you're fishing right where those fish are suspended, where they're keying out on bait fish, and a jerkbait is just a phenomenal way to get those fish to strike. So those 5 baits, if I'm heading out on the water, which I am in a couple hours, I'm going to have these baits tied up. I'm going to be just trying to cover a lot of water. I'm going to be keying in on areas that have bait fish, that have specific targets that are going to be absorbing heat. And, those are going to be the main primary things. I will also say a lot of times when you do find a piece of cover that is productive, you can go back a little bit later, catch a fish off that same piece of cover, because there is so much fish movement and transition going on right now that those pieces will reload. So hopefully these give you a couple of tips and hints as to how to go about and approach your local lake. Hopefully it helps you catch a few more fish this fall. I got to tell you, Just because other people aren't on the water and they're out in the woods doesn't mean you shouldn't be out on the water catching a few extra bass, because it is one of the absolute best times to be on the water. And half the time I feel like the lakes are completely empty. So get out on the water, catch a few bass before you regret it. And we're sitting here with frozen water, or at least if you live down south, some very cold temperatures. So thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate all the support. Stay tuned. We'll have a new video coming out tomorrow.